Matter we're going to take up is the appointment of Richard A. Marilla, Vicing Associate Justice John A. Mutter as an Associate Justice of the Rhode Island Family Court. We have two witnesses signed up to testify. Chief Judge Fort, if you would take your time and come up to the middle, please. You would just remain standing and be sworn in. I've been waiting for this all day.
You should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, I hope you God.
You do.
Good afternoon, Chief, and welcome. A lot better now.
Along with family and friends. It's with conviction and without reservation that I come before you today to support Richard Marola's nomination for the position of Associate Justice of the Rhode Island Family Court. Over the course of my 30 years plus on the Family Court bench, I've had ample opportunity to observe firsthand Richard Marola's work ethic, his compassion for his clients, his legal experience and respect for the law, as well as the zeal with which he pursues his clients' interests. Richard Berola has repeatedly demonstrated to me that though he is thorough in his preparation and possesses a superior knowledge of the law and the procedure, most notably he is respected in the courtroom regardless of their sex, color, lifestyle, or culture. He has the valuable and sadly increasingly rare ability to work courteously and civilly with opponents. One of Richard's distinguished accomplishments is that based on reviews by his peers, Richard is rated AV preeminent by the Martindale-Hubbell National Law Directory. This is the highest possible rating available to lawyers in both legal ability and ethical standards. And not surprisingly, Richard's amicable ways with judges, fellow lawyers, and courtroom staff can also be seen in his community involvement. He served as a coach, or as he's described it, head cheerleader for several youth sports teams, and he's also been a great supporter of the jumping derby held in Portsmouth. I can't help but wonder how many sporting events culminated in festive pizza parties at his house around his backyard pizza oven. By the way, Richard's brick oven pizza does sound good to me, and I'm looking forward to processing and assessing office assignments based on how that works out. Although he has practiced before other courts in both Rhode Island and the federal system, he has concentrated his practice in family law for most of his legal career. Additionally, he obtained some first-hand judicial experience while sitting as a municipal judge in the town of Smithfield. There's no question that upon this committee's confirmation of the governor's nomination of Richard Marilla, he will be prepared to assume the duties of associate judge from the moment he is sworn into office. Most assuredly, those duties will be carried out with the same dignity, compassion, and thoroughness that has been demonstrated throughout his legal career. What I find to be the most significant characteristic for a judicial candidate who is otherwise qualified is the candidate's demeanor. Richard Marola's sense of compassion, geniality, intellect, and most importantly, evenness of temper is very impressive. I used to think that you had to be a real smart guy to be a lawyer and a judge, but now I know it's mostly street smarts and temperament. And certainly he possesses both street smarts and temperament, and we're all looking forward really not only to work with him, but to see how he performs on the bench. He is respected by the members of the judiciary, and I suspect by the members of other courts that he has appeared in as well. He is considered a lawyer's lawyer by his peers. Whenever his name is mentioned in legal circles, invariably the reaction is, Richard is a really nice guy. I think that says it all. In my personal opinion, Richard's character and ethics are beyond reproach, and it's without any reservation that I support his candidacy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions or comments for Chief Judge Fort? Thank you. The next witness we have signed up to testify is Katie Riley. Katie, if you could just remain standing, the stenographer will swear you in.
Please solemnly swear the testimony you about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Ready?
Katie, good afternoon and welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Lynch, Prada, and members of the committee.
My name is Katie Riley, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my father,
Katie,
Richard
I'm
Berola.
sorry to interrupt you, but just make sure the button is up in front of you. There you go. Up.
Up. Okay. I'll just start over.
We can hear you, the TV can't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Although I have lived with Richard, the lawyer, nearly all of my life, my knowledge of the judicial system is considerably more minute than you'd imagine, so please bear with me. One of Richard's many pleasant qualities is that his ability to keep work and family life separate, something I've always appreciated. With that said, when I think of the judicial system, the first image that comes to mind is that of Lady Justice with her blindfold, sword, and scale. As a daughter of Richard, the parallels are easy to draw upon between the man I've come to know as Dad and this important cultural figure, and I would like to demonstrate them now. As I stated in my introduction, my name is Riley and not Marilla like my father's. The reason for this is not because I'm fortunate enough to have started my own family, but rather because I am not Richard's biological family member. This has in no way ever negatively affected my life. If anything, the simple twist of fate that led my mother to Richard was the best thing that has ever happened to me. There will never be anything I can do to express the gratitude I feel for Richard's incredible ability to turn a blind eye to our hectic and at times odd family dynamic, but I am beyond certain that this characteristic makes for nothing less than the strongest judiciary candidate. He is completely accepted, loved, and always made me feel like I was his own, while somehow both understanding and negating the life circumstances that were simply out of my control. Any daughter of a good man can easily draw upon the symbology of the sword, but for the sake of analogy, I can with the utmost honesty attest to his ability for swift and just punishment. It's true. Richard's stern parenting skills have given the world two self-sufficient, college-educated, hard-working children with a clear understanding of right and wrong. He has managed to build a beautiful family any man would be proud of by setting a pristine example and both quickly and wisely acting when his expectations were not met. My final and most important consideration that I feel qualifies Richard is his enthusiastic and intuitive approach to balance. For every bit of his kindness, he is tenacious. For every demonstration of compassion, there is unbreakable strength. Richard truly walks a fine line that only great men can, and to me, not only makes him an easy choice for judicial pursuit, but the best father I could have ever asked for. In closing, I'd like to thank you for listening to me this afternoon and hope that in some small way, the things I have said about my father have resonated with you in a fraction of the way he has with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions or comments for Katie? Thank you.
Thanks.
These are the only two witnesses that we had signed up to testify this afternoon. Before I call the candidate, is there anyone else here who wishes to testify on this nomination? Richard, come on up. If you could just remain standing so the stenographer can swear you in, please.
You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do. Thank you.
Richard, good afternoon and welcome. If
Good
you could just
afternoon.
take a few minutes and tell us about yourself.
Is the microphone on? Thank you. First, I'd like to say to all of you, first, thank you, Chairwoman Lynch Prada, President Ruggiero, Vice President McCaffrey, and all members of the committee. First, I'd like to say that I'm more than humbled to be sitting here in front of you today, and I know you've had my information in my application, but I just want to first talk about some things that you might not have been able to glean from my professional information. I'd like to tell you a little bit about my family life. Now, you heard my daughter, Katie. I just want to tell you a little bit about my wife, Cheryl, and I, and how we met. It's kind of interesting, and I don't want to bore you to tears, so I'll be quick. So I met my wife, Cheryl, when I was in my last year of law school, and I happened to run into her with an acquaintance, and we had a nice conversation. And as we were talking, we discovered that my cousin, whom I had been working for, was her divorce lawyer. So that led to many funny stories and whatnot. She told me she had a couple of children, and she told me the things that she did. She was a preschool teacher. I told her that I live with my mom and my dad, and I pretty much have no responsibilities but to take care of myself. And we laughed, and we went on. And so when I got back to work, I happened to ask one of the secretaries, one Linda, who my wife told me she knew. And I asked Linda, hey, do you remember Cheryl Armstrong, by the way? And then, oh, I know her very well. Our kids are in dance together. And so I said to Linda, well, do you happen to have her phone number? So she did. She gave me her phone number. So I sat on it for a couple of days, and I worked up the gumption to call her. And I was a little shy about these things, so I get her on the phone, and we're talking, and I'm stammering, kind of how I'm stammering now. And finally, I got it out, and I asked her if she'd like to go out sometime. And there was that pause, and she said, I don't know. I have to ask my mother. Now, I've had many no's, but I've never had an, I don't know, I have to ask my mother. So I was silent for a moment. So she said, well, no, I mean, I want to, but my mother babysits for my kids, so I have to work it out. Okay, so we made a plan, and we went out, and then things progressed. We were dating for months, and then at what I thought was too long a period of time, she decided it was okay that I could meet her children, Katie and Brent. And that day came, my sister was having a birthday party for my niece, Lauren. We said, perfect thing, great way. And the party went well. I met the kids, and it all went a little sideways when my son Brent fell off the slide and started crying and blamed somebody else. We had a little bit of a problem. But other than that, things were great. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. And I say this not to bore you to death, but just to tell you that as far as my personal life goes, the most rewarding and fulfilling thing that I've ever done is help raise Katie and Brent, and I thank my wife for that. So now onto my professional experience. I've been practicing for a little over 25 years now, and throughout that entire time, I've concentrated my work in family court. When I first started working for my cousin, the day I passed the bar, the next day I got to the office, and there were every file that nobody in the office wanted was on my desk for me to deal with in every court around the state. And then I began my sojourn into running here, running there, and I've had the fortune to be able to practice in all of the courts of the state. But for whatever reason, I was drawn to family court, and that's where my focus has stayed. And it's remained to this point in time. I don't think there's any area of the law that's easy to practice in, but there's none more challenging than family court for many reasons. The emotion, the level of angst that you have there, and it's very easy. It's very easy to fall into a trap in family court and take on your client's anger. I've tried to stay away from that. As I practiced, I've always looked at my clients, and I've represented clients in every socioeconomic background, every race, every religion, every option. I don't look at clients that way. I look at them as a problem. They come in, and I listen to them, and I just best determine how I can help them. And I've tried to practice that way my entire career, and it's been fulfilling. There's been some challenging days, but that is the way I approached my practice. And I don't think there's any other way to do it. I think everybody knows in family court, it's very easy to ramp up problems, and I think you have to be conscious to stay away from that, and I've always tried to do that. I'd like to close before taking your questions, and first I would just like to thank you all for the work that you do for the people of Rhode Island. First of all, you're all elected officials, and I know what it takes for that to happen. Second of all, once you get the position you're in, I don't know if people realize, I've learned since I've been in this process, how much time you legislators put in to your jobs, and it's the time typically that all of us would be spending with our families. This is the time that you all give up for the people of Rhode Island and work for us, and I appreciate that. I don't think there's any more valuable time than we have is the time that we would spend with our family, and you give much of that up to do this. So I'd like to thank you for that. I close. I think some of you may know that I attempted to be an elected official on a couple of occasions. I ran for town council in Smithfield. In 2004 was my first foray into politics, and I never had any experience before. I ran for town council. I had a treasurer, and I was responsible to file certain reports with the Department of Elections regarding campaign financing. I toward the end of that, at some point, it was 2004, I don't remember exactly, but I failed to timely file my final reports and some reports. Eventually, I filed all of those. There was a fine associated with it, and I paid the fine. Then in 2010, I was asked again by the party to run, and I did. And in 2010, I didn't have any intention on taking contributions from anyone. I had a self-funded campaign. So I filed my original paperwork, and I did not timely file my the following dates and the closing paperwork. When I learned that I had erred, I went to the Department of Elections directly. I filed all of those reports, caught them all up. I paid whatever fine was associated with that, and that was the last I had heard of that. And I just wanted to say that you know I failed at that portion of my campaign, and I didn't get elected either. With that, I'd like to close, and I would take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Marilla? Senator Archambault.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Richard, first and foremost, I've known you a long time, and that campaign that you ran in 2004 was actually the first campaign I ever worked on. It was your campaign. I think it's probably an irony and a blessing that you didn't get elected in that office because of where you sit today. The fact that you talked about your family, and, you know, many people come before us and they talk about a lot of things, and it's all heartfelt, I'm sure, at this level. But the fact that you talked about your family and that's what is so important to you, it's refreshing, it's heartwarming. You can feel the emotion up here. I have known your temperament because I worked with you on the court in Smithfield, and we created that municipal court when I was on the council, and we really didn't have a format. So when you and I sat there, we really didn't have any system. And I watched you put together a system. I watched you deal with people who didn't have the money to clean up their house. You remember the woman who had a fish tank in front of her yard, right? Poor lady. And we had great patience with her. We kept bringing people back. And I saw in you, and I'm not blowing any smoke, this is coming straight out. I saw in you the temperament of a guy that really looked for a remedy that worked for people, irrespective of economic origins, or everybody got treated the same. And it was refreshing. I felt really comfortable. We put together a really good system because of you, really. I just brought people in like an investigator. I stepped back and you took the lead, and it was great. So it's an honor to have you here before us today. It's an honor to have you as a nominee before the court. And I look forward to more guitar playing from you, too. You left that out. Richard's becoming quite a good guitar player, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Senator Lombardi.
Thank you, Richard. Welcome. First, I want to comment that the fact that you lost in Smithfield is indicative of what they do elect in Smithfield. But that's
Is there nothing sacred?
but in all sincerity, oftentimes this process that we call advice and consent comes about a little casually, and there's a lot of laughing and a lot of joking, and sometimes the true importance of what this means, it gets lost sometimes. And I think that I start by saying that the governor has hit it on the head again with her judicial appointments. I believe that this body here, and I say this, and I thought about this coming here today, as the most senior lawyer on judiciary, I can say I think we have a public duty to vet this process and not just make it a rubber stamp process. So I applaud you first for hitting on the forefront the issue that appeared in the Providence Journal. Why that was relevant is everyone's best guess, but I applaud you for doing that. I also know you, and I always talk about the importance of what we do here in selecting judges, and the first thing we always look to is this phrase that we call judicial temperament. And no one can give me a black letter law definition of what judicial temperament means, but I think it's a collaboration of knowledge, of emotions, of even-temperedness, and a sense of what's fair. And I think that all of those modifiers display you particularly. It's particularly poignant when we talk about you. You and I have had cases against one another. We've had cases where we've bounced things against one another. And people don't realize, unless you're there in the trenches, particularly in the family court, it's very emotional. Relationships are ending. Children are being lost. You know, people are fighting over children. People do stupid things in the guise of fighting over children. And you're always there. And you said something that was very important, and I think you defined yourself right perfectly when you said you don't take on your client's anger, because there's an awful lot of anger up there, and sometimes people get blinded by that anger. So I applaud the governor again for making this appointment. Someone who's been in the trenches, and I can think of the time when you walked into my conference room and saw my conference room table filled with files about one case that's currently pending in the family court. And as another lawyer once told me, I got to fire my client, and you were the one that took it on. So I thank you for that burden that you relieved me of as well. But the governor's hit it on the head. You've got the perfect judicial temperament, the perfect knowledge, and I know you're going to make this committee and the entire Senate proud, and I applaud you for that. And lastly, as a father of a daughter, nothing was more poignant than watching your tears as your daughter spoke on your behalf, and that's very important. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, before we move on to voting, I just also wanted to say I, too, am one of those people who spend most of my time in family court, smart or not, I'm there as well. And I've had the opportunity to work with you, to work against you, and you've never been anything but cordial, responsive. You're one of the people that, you get excited when you find out you're on the other side, because the hope always is you can work it out without too much turmoil, without too much grief. But aside from you as a lawyer, you're a good person. We have the opportunity to, talk in the hallway. Everything is hurry up and wait. No offense, Chief, but we get, to the courthouse on time, and we spend a lot of time in the hallway. And not only have I gotten to know you as a lawyer, but as a person as well. And I think you're the perfect person for the job. Another thing that I just do want to mention is, I too read the newspaper. I was aware of, the issue with respect to the Board of Elections in a late filing. So I did go on the Board of Elections, and I reviewed all of the filings that you had made. I know some other members of the committee reviewed them as well. And after having reviewed them, I have zero concern about your ethics. I have zero concern about, your propriety to be a judge. I think that, again, Rhode Island is going to very much benefit from you going on the bench. I know the family court is very much going to benefit from you being on the bench. Judge Mutter, if I remember correctly, died 2.5 years ago now, so we've been waiting a long time to fill, even though he was a small man, his very large shoes. So having said all of that, Senator Archambault, do you have a motion?
Before family court judge.
Senator Archambault moves that this committee recommend the advice and consent of Richard A. Marilla, vicing Associate Justice John Mutter as an Associate Justice of the Rhode Island Family Court. Seconded by Senator Lombardi, Senator Coyne, President Ruggiero, Leader McCaffrey, Whip Goodwin, Leader Algier, Senator Oyer, Senator Metz, Senator McKinney, Senator De La Cruz. You have to raise your hand a little higher. I know you're new at this. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Advice and consent is recommended. Congratulations.
Thank you.